First contact under fire. The Galactic Coalition's last defensive line fractured like glass. Admiral Tora Navik watched from the command bridge of the Eternal Justice as another of her cruisers disintegrated under concentrated fire from the Korthan fleet. The magnificent vessel, once the pride of the Solarian shipyards, became nothing more than expanding debris and the brief, silent flashes of her crew's final moments. "Status report," Navik demanded, her four eyes narrowing as holographic displays bathed the bridge in crimson emergency lighting. "Shields at 27%. Admiral," responded her second-in-command, Commander Drell. The insectoid officer's mandibles clicked nervously as data streamed across multiple monitors. "The Archon battle group has been completely destroyed. The Elysian support vessels are reporting critical failures in their propulsion systems." Navik's translucent skin paled further. The Coalition forces had been fighting for 36 hours straight, pushed back to the edge of the Helios Nebula, their final strategic position before the core worlds of the Coalition itself. The Korthan flagship is preparing another salvo from their matter disruptor, called the Tactical Officer, voice quivering despite years of military discipline. The Admiral stared at the massive Korthan vessel dominating the viewscreen. The Oblivion Fist stretched nearly 7 kilometers from bow to stern, its black hull absorbing rather than reflecting starlight, as if it consumed hope itself. Its primary weapon, a matter disruptor capable of unraveling atomic bonds, had already claimed 4 capital ships. One more shot would finish the Coalition's resistance. "All remaining vessels, form defensive pattern Omega," Navik ordered. It was a desperate move, sacrificing ships to shield the command vessel and buy precious minutes for civilian evacuation. "Begin emergency jumps for all transports carrying refugees." As the orders transmitted across what remained of her fleet, the communications officer suddenly straightened, pressing one tendril to her receiver. "Admiral, we're detecting an unidentified vessel approaching at high velocity." "Korthan reinforcements?" Navik asked, feeling the last ember of hope within her dim. "Negative. Unknown configuration. It's not in any of our databases." The tactical display shimmered, revealing a new contact emerging from the edge of the system. It moved unlike any vessel Navik had ever seen, not using standard hyperlane approaches, but cutting through space in a way that seemed to defy conventional physics. "On screen," she ordered. The main view screen flickered to life, and for a moment, absolute silence fell across the command bridge. The approaching vessel looked nothing like ships in the known galaxy, where Coalition vessels were elegant and organic, designed to work in harmony with the cosmic energies, and Korthan ships were angular and precise. This newcomer was something else entirely. It was a brutalist nightmare of armored plating and exposed weapon systems, lacking the aesthetic considerations that most spacefaring civilizations incorporated into their designs. Its hull bore the scars of previous conflicts, yet it moved with purpose and power. Emblazoned on its side in an unknown script was a single word: STORMBREAKER. Within the Korthan fleet, the arrival of this unknown vessel caused momentary confusion. Their perfect formations faltered as their commanders attempted to classify this new threat. On the bridge of the human warship Stormbreaker, Commander Ilara Voss stood with hands clasped behind her back, studying tactical readouts with calm determination. Unlike the exotic alien designs of the Coalition vessels, the Stormbreaker's bridge was utilitarian, designed for function over form, with hardened systems and redundant controls. "Analysis of enemy fleet?" she asked. Lieutenant Rivera answered without looking up from his station. 43 combat vessels, including that monstrosity at the center. Their technology is significantly advanced, but they've never encountered our defensive systems before. Their targeting algorithms will need time to adjust. Ilara nodded, her gray eyes fixed on the massive Korthan flagship. Humanity had been watching the galactic conflict from the shadows for years, gathering intelligence and studying both Coalition and Korthan technology from a distance. They had chosen to reveal themselves now, at this critical moment, not out of altruism but necessity. If the coalition fell, Earth would eventually face the Corthan Dominion alone. "Open a channel to the coalition flagship," she ordered. "Channel open, Commander." Ilara squared her shoulders. "This is Commander Ilara Voss of the Earth vessel Stormbreaker. Stand by for assistance." On the coalition command ship, Admiral Navik stared at the alien face on her view screen. The being was bipedal with smooth skin and hair only on the top of its head. Its eyes were forward-facing like a predator's, but held an intelligence that sent a shiver through her body. "I am Admiral Navik of the Galactic Coalition. We welcome your assistance, though I fear you have arrived too late. The Corthan fleet." "We're aware of the situation, Admiral," the human interrupted. "Please have your forces clear a path between us and the Corthan flagship." Navik's 4 eyes blinked in confusion. A direct approach would be suicide. "Their matter disruptor will tear your vessel apart." The human's expression remained unchanged. "That's a negative, Admiral. Just clear the path." Before Navik could respond, the human vessel accelerated, its engines flaring with an intensity that overwhelmed coalition sensors. The ship moved with a speed that should have been impossible for its mass, bearing down on the Corthan forces like a predator targeting its prey. The Corthans responded immediately, their smaller vessels moving to intercept while the flagship began charging its matter disruptor. Beams of coherent energy lashed out, striking the Stormbreaker's hull in a display that should have vaporized the vessel. Instead, something extraordinary happened. The energy weapons seemed to dissipate across the human vessel's hull, absorbed by some unknown technology. Where coalition shields would have collapsed under such firepower, the Stormbreaker pushed forward unhindered. "Impossible," Navik whispered. On the Stormbreaker, Ilara's voice remained steady. "Kinetic batteries 1 through 6, prepare for salvo. Target their escort vessels." "Batteries ready, Commander," the weapons officer reported. "Fire." The Stormbreaker's hull shuddered as massive accelerators launched projectiles at velocities approaching a significant fraction of light speed. There were no energy beams, no exotic particles, just solid slugs of dense metal propelled by the fundamental forces of momentum and inertia. The Corthan vessels, their defenses calibrated for energy weapons, stood no chance. The kinetic projectiles tore through their hulls like paper, converting their velocity into catastrophic energy upon impact. 5 Corthan cruisers erupted into expanding clouds of debris within seconds. The coalition observers watched in stunned silence. Kinetic weapons were considered primitive, abandoned by most civilizations once energy weapons became viable. Yet these humans had refined them to devastating effect. "Secondary batteries targeting their flanking vessels," Ilara continued. "Prepare main gun for the flagship." The front of the Stormbreaker split open, revealing what appeared to be an oversized railgun of unprecedented proportions. The weapon's magnetic coils began to glow as they charged, drawing power from the ship's core. The Corthan flagship, recognizing the threat, redirected its matter disruptor toward the human vessel. The space between them distorted as molecular forces were manipulated on a scale that could tear planets apart. "They're firing their primary weapon," Rivera warned. Ilara nodded. "Quantum field countermeasures active." As the matter disruptor fired, the space around the Stormbreaker warped and twisted. For a moment, it seemed as though the human vessel would be torn apart at the molecular level. Instead, a series of specialized emitters along the Stormbreaker's hull activated, generating an opposing quantum field that neutralized the attack. "Countermeasures holding," Rivera reported, a note of pride in his voice. "Main gun at full charge," the weapons officer announced. Ilara leaned forward. "Fire." The Stormbreaker's main gun discharged with a burst of electromagnetic energy so intense it was visible to the naked eye. A spear of pure destruction lanced across space. The projectile, accelerated to relativistic speeds, struck the Corthan flagship at its core. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the massive vessel began to split apart, a catastrophic wound carved through its center. Secondary explosions rippled along its length as systems failed and power cores destabilized. The mighty Oblivion Fist, pride of the Korthan fleet, broke into two massive sections that drifted apart, trailing debris and atmosphere. Silence fell across the battlefield. The remaining Korthan vessels, suddenly without their command ship, froze in confusion. Their coordinated efficiency that made them so formidable was temporarily disrupted. All batteries, target remaining Korthan vessels, Ilara ordered. Admiral Navik, I suggest your forces move to engage while their command structure is disrupted. On the Coalition flagship, Navik finally broke free from her shock. All vessels, attack pattern Delta. Target the disorganized enemy forces. The Coalition ships, reinvigorated by this unexpected turn of events, surged forward. They had been on the brink of annihilation moments before, but now they pressed the advantage, their weapons finding purchase against the suddenly vulnerable Korthan fleet. The Stormbreaker moved methodically through the battlefield, its kinetic weapons systematically dismantling the larger Korthan vessels, while Coalition forces handled the smaller threats. Within 2 hours, what had been an impending defeat transformed into a decisive victory as the last Korthan ship either retreated or surrendered. As the Coalition began recovery operations, Commander Ilara received a transmission from the Coalition flagship. Commander Voss, Admiral Navik began, her translator struggling to convey the mixture of emotions in her voice. It seems we owe you our gratitude. Without your intervention, the Coalition would have fallen today. Ilara nodded curtly. The Korthan Dominion is a threat to all free species, Admiral, including humanity. We had no knowledge of your civilization until today, Navik admitted. Your technology, your methods of warfare, they are unlike anything we have encountered. Humanity has been observing the conflict from our corner of the galaxy, Ilara explained. We've had time to prepare, to develop countermeasures against Korthan weapons. And yet you chose to reveal yourselves now. Why? Ilara's expression hardened. Because the Korthan expansion reached a critical point. If they had defeated your forces here, their next target would have been our territory. We decided a preemptive strike was necessary. Navik's 4 eyes studied the human commander with new understanding. Then perhaps it is time for a more formal alliance. The Coalition Council will want to meet with representatives of your species. We'd welcome that discussion, Admiral, Ilara replied. But this was only one battle. The Korthans will regroup, and they'll adapt to our tactics. We bought time, nothing more. As the Coalition fleet began salvage operations, the Stormbreaker stood vigilant at the edge of the system. The arrival of humanity on the galactic stage had changed everything in a single decisive engagement. The silence that had fallen across the battlefield when they arrived had been broken, replaced by the beginnings of a new chapter in the interstellar conflict. And throughout the Coalition worlds, word began to spread of the fearsome humans and their warship called the Stormbreaker, who had done the impossible and turned the tide against the relentless Korthan Dominion. The Reckoning. 3 days after the Battle of Helios Nebula, the Stormbreaker docked with Celestial Harmony, the grand space station serving as the mobile headquarters of the Galactic Coalition Council. The massive structure, a marvel of engineering that combined architectural styles from 12 different species, rotated slowly against the backdrop of a blue giant star, its crystalline spires catching the light in mesmerizing patterns. Commander Ilara Voss stood before the Coalition War Council, 17 representatives from the surviving member species arranged in a semicircle before her. Admiral Navik occupied a position of honor, her translucent skin now adorned with ceremonial markings to commemorate the recent victory. The Council extends its formal gratitude to you and your crew, Commander Voss. Navik began, her translator conveying the gravity in her tone. Your intervention has given the Coalition something we have lacked for too long. Hope. Ilara nodded respectfully, her uniform pristine despite the recent battle. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, Admiral. Humanity recognizes that our fate is now tied to yours. An Archean counselor, a crystalline being whose form refracted light in complex patterns, spoke in a voice like wind chimes. Your weapons technology is primitive by our standards, and yet devastatingly effective against Korthan defenses. How is this possible? Sometimes the oldest solutions are the best, Ilara replied. The Corthans adapted to counter energy-based weapons because that's what the Coalition uses. Their shields are calibrated for plasma, lasers, and particle beams. We simply approached the problem differently. By hurling metal very, very fast, remarked another counselor, mandibles clicking in what might have been amusement. Precisely, Ilara confirmed without a hint of embarrassment. While the Coalition pursued increasingly complex energy weapons, humanity refined the basics. Our railguns accelerate projectiles to relativistic speeds. Against shields designed for energy dispersal, they're practically unstoppable. The council chambers fell silent as the implications settled over the assembled representatives. The Coalition had been losing the war because they had been fighting it on the Corthans' terms. Humanity, an unknown variable, had changed the equation. "What do you require from us, Commander Voss?" Navik asked finally. "Intelligence," Ilara answered immediately. "Everything you have on Corthan fleet movements, command structures, and communication protocols. In return, we'll provide technical specifications to retrofit your vessels with kinetic weapon systems." The Archean representative spoke again, their crystalline form glinting. "You assume the Corthans will not adapt to your tactics. They are nothing if not adaptable." Ilara's expression hardened. "We're counting on it. Every adaptation requires resources and time. We intend to press our advantage before they can develop effective countermeasures." Before the Council could respond, the Chamber's alert system activated. Holographic displays materialized around the room, showing a massive surge of activity from Corthan-controlled space. Multiple hyperspace signatures detected. A tactical officer reported, her voice tight with alarm. "Corthan vessels on approach to celestial harmony. Estimated arrival: 4 hours." Navik's posture stiffened. How did they locate the station so quickly? "We only just arrived." "They've been tracking us," Ilara realized, her tactical mind racing ahead. "Not us, the Stormbreaker. Our arrival changed their strategic calculus. They're not here to continue their campaign against the Coalition. They're here to eliminate the human threat before we can share our technology." The Council erupted into alarmed conversations as tactical displays showed the approaching Corthan fleet. It was 3 times larger than the one they had faced at Helios Nebula, centered around not 1 but 5 flagships of equal size to the destroyed Oblivion Fist. "We should evacuate," a counselor suggested, fear evident in their voice. "No time," Ilara countered. "Their approach vector suggests they'll intercept any attempt to flee. We need to make a stand here." Navik studied the human commander with newfound respect. "You would risk your vessel again after seeing the force arrayed against us." "The Stormbreaker was built for this," Ilara replied simply, "but we'll need support from every combat-capable ship in the Coalition fleet." Within the hour, battle preparations were underway. The Stormbreaker moved to a defensive position near Celestial Harmony, its weapon systems cycling through diagnostics while engineering teams worked tirelessly to repair damage from the previous engagement. Coalition vessels, those that could still fight, formed a protective screen around the station. On the bridge of the Stormbreaker, Ilara studied tactical projections with her senior officers. Lieutenant Rivera pointed to the holographic display of the approaching Corthan fleet. "Those flagships have been modified," he noted grimly. "They've reinforced their hulls with some kind of composite armor, likely designed to withstand kinetic impacts." "They've been preparing for us longer than we realized," Ilara murmured. "The question is, how much do they actually know about our capabilities?" The answer came sooner than expected. A transmission cut through Coalition encryption, displaying on the main view screen without authorization. The figure that appeared was unlike the drone operators they had encountered before. This was a true Corthan High Commander, its exoskeletal form housed within a life support chamber filled with swirling purple mist. "Commander Ilara Voss of Earth," the being spoke, its voice a harmonized chorus that suggested multiple consciousness streams operating in concert. I am High Commander Krulvaz of the Korthan Dominion. Ilara stepped forward, her expression neutral. You know my name. That puts me at a disadvantage, High Commander. A temporary one, Krulvaz replied. Your species' intervention was unexpected, an interesting variable in what had been a predictable equation, but ultimately irrelevant. Our last encounter suggests otherwise, Ilara countered. The High Commander's compound eyes pulsed with an inner light, a statistical anomaly. You exploited a tactical oversight that has now been corrected. The Dominion adapts, Commander. It is what we do. It is why we will prevail. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the bridge in silence. They're confident, Rivera observed. They don't know what we're truly capable of, Ilara replied. That's our advantage. She turned to her communications officer. Open a channel to Admiral Navik. Moments later, Navik's face appeared on the screen. Commander Voss, our sensors confirm the Korthan fleet will arrive in 3 hours. We've mobilized every available vessel, but I fear it won't be enough. It's time to show our full hand, Admiral, Ilara said. With your permission, I'd like to deploy our phase shift technology. Navik's 4 eyes widened. You have more capabilities you haven't revealed. The Stormbreaker was designed as a last resort, Admiral. What you saw at Helios was just our conventional arsenal. 2 hours later, as the Korthan fleet dropped out of hyperspace, they were met not by a desperate, disorganized defense, but by a carefully orchestrated trap. The Stormbreaker had positioned itself directly in their path, seemingly alone and vulnerable. On the massive lead Korthan flagship, High Commander Krulvaz observed the solitary human vessel with something approaching amusement. They send one ship to face our armada, he remarked to his subordinates. Either they are fools or they know something we do not. Our sensors detect no other vessels within engagement range, High Commander reported his tactical officer. The Coalition fleet appears to be maintaining defensive positions around the station. The humans think they can repeat their success at Helios, Krulvaz concluded. But we have studied their weapons. Our hulls have been reinforced, our shields recalibrated. He leaned forward in his command throne. All vessels, commence firing sequence. Target the human ship with all primary weapons. The Korthan fleet responded with devastating synchronicity. 5 matter disruptors fired simultaneously, their combined power enough to unravel a small moon. The space between the fleets distorted as molecular forces were bent and weaponized. On the Stormbreaker, Ilara stood calm as alarms blared across the bridge. Phase shift drive active, she ordered. As the matter disruptor beams converged on the Stormbreaker, something unprecedented happened. The human vessel seemed to flicker, its outline becoming indistinct just as the weapon struck. Instead of disintegrating, the Stormbreaker phased partially out of normal spacetime, the disruptor beams passing through its semi-corporeal form. Phase shift stable at 87%, the engineering officer reported, tension evident in his voice. We can't maintain this state for more than 3 minutes, Commander. We won't need 3 minutes, Ilara replied. Initiate jump sequence. The Stormbreaker vanished entirely, leaving the Korthan weapons firing at empty space. High Commander Krulvaz rose from his throne. Where did they go? Scan all sectors. Before his officers could respond, the Stormbreaker reappeared, directly behind the Korthan formation. Deploy quantum mines, Ilara ordered. Full spread. From launch bays along the Stormbreaker's hull, hundreds of small devices ejected into space, propelled toward the Korthan fleet's rear. These weren't conventional explosives, but something far more devastating. Quantum-entangled warheads that existed partially in our dimension and partially in subspace. All mines deployed, Commander, the weapons officer confirmed. Detonate. The quantum mines activated simultaneously. There was no conventional explosion, no blinding flash, just a sudden, violent collapse of spacetime around the rear third of the Korthan fleet. 20 ships simply ceased to exist, compressed into singularities no larger than grains of sand before evaporating in bursts of Hawking radiation. The remaining Korthan vessels, disoriented by the sudden attack from behind, began to turn to engage the Stormbreaker. "Now, Admiral," Ilara transmitted. From behind the nearby moon, the Coalition fleet emerged from hiding, their ships now equipped with retrofitted kinetic weapons based on human designs. They struck the flanks of the Korthan formation with devastating effect, railgun projectiles tearing through armor designed to counter the new threat, but not yet perfected. The Stormbreaker pressed forward, its main gun charging for a shot at the lead Korthan flagship. On his vessel, High Commander Krulvaz watched in disbelief as his carefully arranged fleet disintegrated under the combined assault. "Impossible," he whispered. "The calculations, the adaptations, they should have been sufficient." "The human vessel is targeting us," his tactical officer warned. "Their main weapon is charging." Krulvaz stared at the approaching Stormbreaker, understanding finally dawning. "They're not primitive," he realized. "They're pragmatic. They showed us only what they wanted us to see." The Stormbreaker's main gun fired, its relativistic projectile striking the Korthan flagship with unerring precision. The massive vessel shuddered, secondary explosions cascading through its hull as critical systems failed. "Order all remaining vessels to retreat," Krulvaz commanded, his voice no longer the confident chorus it had been. "We must recalculate our approach to this species." As the surviving Korthan ships fled the battlefield, the Coalition vessels pursued, cutting down stragglers with their newly acquired weapons. Within the hour, what had begun as a Korthan trap had become their most devastating defeat in the long war. On the Celestial Harmony Station, the Coalition Council watched in awe as the remnants of the Korthan fleet disappeared into hyperspace. "I believe," Admiral Navik said quietly, "that we need to reconsider humanity's role in this alliance." 1 week later, representatives from Earth arrived at Celestial Harmony to formalize the alliance between humanity and the Galactic Coalition. As diplomatic proceedings unfolded, Commander Ilara Voss stood with Admiral Navik, observing the assembly. "Your deception was masterful," Navik admitted. "You let the Korthans believe they understood your capabilities, then revealed just enough new technology to shatter their confidence." An old human military strategist once said, "All warfare is based on deception," Ilara replied. "We showed the Korthans one face of humanity. They adapted to it, believing they understood us, and that was their mistake." "And what face will you show the Coalition?" Navik asked, her 4 eyes studying the human carefully. Ilara's expression softened slightly. "The face of an ally, Admiral. The Korthans threaten both our civilizations. Together, we have a chance to end their dominance permanently." As the formal proceedings began, news spread throughout Coalition space of the second, even more decisive victory against the Korthan Dominion. The story of how silence had swept across the stars when humanity's warship entered the battle became legend among 100 worlds, a testament to how a single ship had changed the course of a galactic war. And in the quiet moments between battles, even the Korthans spoke in hushed tones of the humans, the species that had emerged from nowhere to challenge their supremacy, wielding both ancient principles and physics-defying technology with equal mastery. The silence that had greeted humanity's arrival had been broken, replaced by the thunder of a new era dawning across the stars.